And let's finish the second chapter of the second book of A Tale of Two Cities, A Sight. The courtroom is being described, and we're going to go back to the beginning of the last paragraph that I was reading, because I rarely listen to myself read, but it was kind of halting as I read that, so let's try and do that a little bit better. Over the prisoner's head there was a mirror to throw the light down upon him. Crowds of wicked and the wretched had been reflected in it, and had passed from its surface and this earth's together. Haunted in a most ghastly manner that abominable place would have been, if the glass could ever have rendered back its reflections, as the ocean one day to give up its dead. Some passing through of the infamy and disgrace for which it had been reserved may have struck the prisoner's mind. Be that as it may, a change in his position making him conscious of a bar of light across his face, he looked up, and when he saw the glass his face flushed, and his right hand pushed the herbs away. It happened that the action turned his face to that side of the court which was on his left, about on a level with his eyes. There sat, in that corner of the judge's bench, two persons upon whom his look immediately rested, so immediately and so much to the changing of his aspect, that all eyes that were turned upon him turned to them. The spectators saw in the two figures a young lady of a little more than 20, and a gentleman who was evidently her father, a man of a very remarkable appearance and respect, of the absolute whiteness of his hair, and a certain indescribable intensity of face, not of an active kind, but pondering and self-commuting. When this expression was upon him, he looked as if he were old, but when he was stirred and broken up, as it was now, but when it was stirred and broken up, as it was now, on his speaking to his daughter, he became a handsome man, not past the prime of life. His daughter had one of her hands drawn through his arm as she sat by him, and the other pressed upon it. She had drawn close to him in her dread of the scene, and in her pity for the prisoner. Her forehead had been strikingly expressive of an engrossing terror and comparison that saw nothing but the peril of the accused. This had been so very noticeable, so very powerfully and naturally shown, that starers who had no pity for him were touched by her, and the whisper went about, "Who are they?" Jerry, the messenger, who had made his own observations in his own manner, and who had been sucking the rust off his fingers in his absorption, stretched his neck to hear who they were. The crowd about him pressed and passed the inquiry on to the nearest attendant, and from him it had been more slowly pressed and passed back. At last it got to Jerry. "Witnesses? For which side? Against? Against what side? The prisoners." The judge, whose eyes had gone in the general direction, recalled them, leaned back in his seat, and looked steadily at the man whose life was in his hand, as Mr. Attorney General rose to spin the rope, grind the axe, and hammer the nails into the scaffold. And that's the end of chapter 2.